the feature that I want to talk about is one of the features that I found most interesting when it came out, and it actually came out first in Illustrator. So if you guys been following the updates, it was roughly a year ago when they introduced the Curvature tool in Illustrator. And now it's also available in Photoshop. So they made it available in Photoshop. And the tool is joined together with the pen tool. So if I zoom a little bit closer, you will be able to see it here. There's the Curvature tool. It's probably worth setting a different shortcut for it as well, because at the moment it's set to P, just like the pen tool, the standard or classic pen tool. But I would probably set it to Shift P or something like that. And the main thing about the Curvature tool is that you can use this for selections, but also to draw shapes. So similarly to the pen tool, that's the main aim with it. But I wonder how many of you guys are actually really confident and like professionals at using the pen tool. Because what I found, even amongst professional designers, using the pen tool is one of those tricky things, a skill that is very useful, but not everyone is really like confident and professional with this tool. So you can let me know in the comments if you love this tool or if you hate it. It's one of those things like Marmite here in England. It's either love it or hate it. I personally love it, but I remember I used to hate it because it's not intuitive. Now, what they try to do with the Curvature tool is to make it more intuitive and user-friendly to work with paths and to create paths and modify them. So let me show you first. If I draw with the pen tool, I'm going to show you already an interesting thing. I showed this in the last week's session, but there is an option now in the settings, in the options bar in Photoshop, that you can change the thickness of your the size of the preview of the path, and you can even change the color if you want. So I can set it maybe to 3 points, and you can see it's a much better, much more visible outline that we are creating. Now, I'm going to switch back to the classic pen tool, and I just show you if I were to select this balloon, which of course in Photoshop we can select in so many different ways, but let's say I want to have a very crisp, sharp edge, and instead of relying on the magic wand or the quick selection tool, I am going to use the pen tool to create this outline, and I actually changed the color now to maybe yellow. That might be a little bit more standout color, so it helps us to see it. Now, with the pen tool, if I just click simply, that obviously just creates straight lines, right? So it's not going to help us with our selection. Let me change the color still, because maybe something like red might stand out a bit more, still not strong. Maybe cyan. All right, cyan probably is the best so far. So with that, as you can see, whenever I click, it's going to create straight lines. Now, I can see some comments already coming in, you guys saying that you're struggling with the pen tool, and that's a very common thing. So this Curvature tool is actually going to help you to learn how to work with the classical pen tool, even if you are not using that. It's a good way of learning to work with parts. So in the old times when we only had the pen tool, we had to learn to click and drag to create our curves, and that way we can create these curves by adding these direction lines. These are the anchor points in the middle, and these handles that are coming out of it we call direction lines. So with that we can create this shape, and we can define the balloon. Now, this obviously is something that you need practice with. And we normally say the less anchor points you use, the better, or the more efficient you are making your paths and selections. But let's have a look at now the Curvature tool. So if you don't know where to place these anchor points, so if you are not confident in that, or if you just generally want to try this tool out, let's see how it works. So if I switch to the Curvature pen tool, it's going to use the same visibility options like we had. So now if I click and click again, notice what will happen, that the previous section of my path keeps moving even while I start preparing by my current section. So if I click again and then move further, see, even the first point, the first section still moves. So it's constantly evolves the whole path based on what my next segment will be. So once again here, you can see, if I zoom a little bit closer, we can see this better. So there is that section that we created, and probably again, if I change to red here, we will see it better. So see, that is quite far from the shape, but once I click further down here, see, it already changed it and altered the previous segment as well, and it got much closer to what we need. So if I go even further, let's say here I want to create a corner point, all I have to tell Photoshop is that this is a corner point, so it doesn't have to be smooth and curved. So I just have to double click there, and then I can click at my next point, and then click, and then again double click because I want to have a sharp turn here, double click again, and then close up the whole path like so. Now if we zoom out and we have a look at this from a distance, it looks quite good, but if there's a couple of additional areas which we need to refine, we can either select our existing points, and this is what I love. So it's not the pen tool still, it's still the curvature tool. It's very important. Then it's not the direct selection tool either. So don't use the white arrow, use still the curvature tool. So with that, if I select a point, notice how I can bend and reshape my path. And I can very quickly refine the points that I used to get a much better looking path by moving these around on the shape. Now, if I find that there is necessary to add an additional point, I just have to click somewhere on the path and just drag it into place, and then maybe adjust these other points as well slightly. So you can see I could tweak this and get an almost perfect alignment. Now, just to show you, if I click here on the top left corner, this area here is where it says mask. If I click on that, it will turn this into a selection, which by the way is a non-destructive selection. So it selected or extracted the whole thing and turned our path into a vector mask. So the good thing about that is that here in the layers panel, if I shift click on that vector mask thumbnail, I can always turn it on and back on again. Now let's have a look at this again in another example. I'm just going to open another file from Bridge, and let's just set ourselves a little bit of a challenge. So what if we need to use this door, this beautiful door from, I guess it's in India. Some of you guys might be from India, so maybe you can tell whether you recognize this door. Whose door is this? Or where does this lead to? But what I want to do is to make a selection of it. Again, use a vector mask and extract it from its background. Now, I love these type of doors. They have so much ornament and just beautiful design in general. So it's again something you would be able to select with things like the quick selection tool. But the problem with the quick selection tool, although it makes a selection really quickly, if I turn this into a mask, so I could do that by clicking on the little Japanese flag icon here at the bottom of the layers panel. The problem with this is that when I zoom closer, you will notice that the quick selection tool tends to create this noisy outline, so it's not going to be a nice and refined edge, what we need for objects. We call these hard-edged details, and these are the things that we need to make sure are always looking crisp and sharp. So how do we do that? Well, I already showed you that we are doing this with the pen tool or the curvature tool. So let's put the curvature tool to a test. I'm just going to keep this mask here, but I will shift click on it, so we remove it or disable it for now. That's called a pixel mask or layer mask, we also call it. And the good thing is that you can have a vector mask and a pixel mask on the same layer, so we can compare what the quick selection tool could do and what our curvature tool can do. So I have the curvature tool, and it's important that it needs to be set to path mode and not shape. If you have it in shape mode, that means it's going to draw a vector shape layer, and that's not what we need. Cool, I can see Deepak replied actually, and he says it's either Rajasthan or Gujarat where the door is from. Brilliant. That's the amazing thing about the internet. So we get our answer straight away. We just need to ask. Jaipur, actually, Ajay says it's from Jaipur. That's Brilliant. All right, so let's continue drawing this, or let's try to create this selection. So I have everything set up, and I'm going to zoom a little bit closer here. So I will start in this corner, but there's already a useful shortcut, and this works with the curvature tool. If you want to draw straight lines, just hold down the Alt or Option key while drawing. So if I hold down Alt and click, notice that this is going to be straight. So the curvature tool is not trying to create curves. So again, Alt click up here, I could again create a straight line there. Now, once again, I'm just going to change my color so we can see a better highlight. Maybe the cyan color here will stand out quite nicely. Yeah, that's quite good. By the way, you have also black and light gray as well if you wanted to change it to that. And you can actually increase the thickness even further. Maybe just for the demonstration, I am going to set this, actually, it only goes up to 3 pixels. I thought we can go higher than that. Yes, we can actually. If we set it to other, no. It stays in 3. So 3 is the maximum. It's good to know. But yeah, it should be enough. If I zoom a little bit closer, we might see it better what I'm doing. So I'm not going to try to be super precise here. I'm just trying to be demonstrate how it works. But let's say I want to do another straight line here. So I still held down the Alt or Option key. And now I'm going to do the following. Instead of trying to force creating curves, I'm going to keep holding down the Alt key and just click on the tips of these curves here. Now you might think like, well, what I'm doing here, it doesn't make sense, but you just bear with me and you will see what happens. So if you hold down the Alt key and just click on these corner points, that will give us a quite good result, because I can then just finish up this whole section. All right, so we have an estimate, or like a rough structure that we created. But now comes the trick. All we have to do is, using the curvature tool, we just click on these curves that we prepared, or those path segments, and just simply click and drag them out. And look at how nicely it does it. Now, if you have by accident a curve point there, you know what to do. Double click on it, and then it goes back into a sharp corner. So once again, let's see it here. If I click and drag, that was fine because the 2 points were actually already corner points. Then if I do it here, I'm going to drag this point here, and then because there is an S curve, so it's not just one curve, it's a more complex curve, I can click and drag 2 anchor points in. And believe me, this makes drawing with paths so much easier, because you don't actually need to know where to place your anchor points. You can actually do it on the go. So you are previewing what happens if you place the curve point in the center. You can see what happens, but then you realize, okay, you probably need to go further to the right to be able to create this bend. And then to add the other anchor point, again, I can click anywhere and then adjust that anchor on the curve as I go ahead. So I can be very, like, it just makes it so much more user-friendly and intuitive. Just let me know if it doesn't make sense, but hopefully you guys like this feature as well as I am, because I think it just makes it so much easier to work with paths. Even though I have like probably 10 years experience of using the pen tool, I would still consider switching on to using the curvature tool, and only if necessary I would switch to the pen tool now, the classic version of the pen tool. So once again here, if I see that there is a point that needs to be converted, I just double click on it and immediately it gets fixed, and then I can just adjust that point on the curve. And of course I can always move these anchor points around as well if they are not placed correctly. So once again I can click here and drag it in place, and then I can add another point here just so this whole path segment, let me just go back one step, this whole path segment goes into the place it needs to go. So let's have a look at from this of this from a distance. And if now I click on the mask option on the top left corner on the control bar, that's what we get. That's our selection. So that compared to the other mask that we created from close up, we can see. So this is the other mask. All right. and probably it's better to see it like this. So we have a very noisy edge, while with our vector mask we have a beautiful sharp edge everywhere. So we get the perfect outline that we needed. Okay, now of course I could go further and I could refine my vector mask if I wanted to, but let's move on to our next feature to make sure that we have time for everything. So even though this wasn't really like highlighted by Adobe as an amazing new feature, they mention it, and they actually use the door. That inspired me to use a door as well. But they're not really explaining well why is it so revolutionary and why is it so important for us designers. Because obviously we have to make selections, and making selections of objects, you should always use paths and vector masks. So now in Photoshop, finally, we have a much more intuitive way to do that. Instead of using the classic pen tool, we can use the curvature tool. All right. So the next thing I want to show you is still in, actually, let me just show you this in Illustrator. Now that we're talking about the curvature tool, I mentioned that it has been available in Illustrator, and that's something I wanted to show you right now. So if I go to Illustrator, we can see that we have the curvature tool here as well. So let me just select it. And it works exactly the same way. And once again, I would use exactly the same method as well. So I will just set up my fill color to nothing. Increase my stroke color maybe to 3 points and red, just so we can see our outline. And same method. For those who are new to drawing with paths, now with the curvature tool, both in Illustrator and in Photoshop, you can get into drawing with paths much easier, because all you have to do is to click on the corner points. So once again, instead of letting the curvature tool to draw curves, I hold down the Alt key, and just like in Photoshop, here again, I can just click on the corner points, right? And then once we have each of these corner points in place, like so, the last one we have to just double click again or alt click on it to make sure it stays a corner point. So once we have everything in place, now comes the fun bit when we just click on these curves and drag them into place. And once again, the best thing about this is that it doesn't matter where I clicked on that curve segment. As long as I start pulling it around, I will find the best position for it. So it actually, the curvature tool teaches you where to place your anchor points. And if you use it enough, or if you work with it enough, it might actually teach you how to work with the pen tool. So you can see, if you ever want to go back after this to the pen tool, it teaches you how to work with it. So like here as well on the top, we can just pull that down. And for this segment, probably is not enough to add 1 point, but we can try. If I drag this down, we can see it's not going to work. It's not going to be enough. So I'm going to drag 1 point here and then add another point in there. And there you go. We got it almost right. I think I forgot to add this point up here. Yep, that's it. And now we drag this one down here and then add another point. And there you go. So we have the Batman logo ready, and just to make sure it looks okay, we will turn it to black and white, and I will turn off the original layer. So that is quite impressive, and the cool thing is that it works exactly the same way in Photoshop and Illustrator. And just one important thing to remember is that whenever you use the curvature tool, both in Photoshop and in Illustrator, it's the same thing. You want to keep using it even when you want to make changes on the path, because by using that, you will see that it moves all the anchor points around your shape, so it will adjust everything accordingly, and it won't deform or distort the whole path. It will keep working in a flexible way. Just to show you an example of this, I'm just going to create a new document. By the way, that's also a new feature or an improvement, that in all the Adobe applications, they improved the new document dialog box speed. For it to come up, now it comes up much faster. Some of you might remember that since they introduced this new layout for the new document dialog box, it really slowed it down, and it was really like slow to load up. Luckily, they now fix that and it loads up much faster. So if I create a new document, we can now just test this out again. If I use the curvature tool, so you can see that it creates this shape, and then each point that I'm moving around will mold the surrounding points around it. So it's not only moving that curved segment, but the neighboring sections as well. It always tries to smooth it out. So think of this as like the pen tool combined with the smooth tool in Illustrator. It's almost the same thing as if we were using those two together. Okay, so let me move on, and hopefully that made sense as well. I'm going to show you, while we are here in Illustrator, I'm going to jump back and forth between these applications. I'm going to show you something else here. You probably heard of the puppet warp feature that came out in Illustrator, and again, it's something that was available before in Photoshop, but now we have it available here in Illustrator, and I just love this feature. This is something that really revolutionizes working with vector shapes in general, especially with characters. It's good for other things as well, but for character art and character design is just amazing. So let me show this with the little Native American character we have here. Let's say we drew this character, and then we were told by our client that they actually wanted the bow to aim above, I mean to the sky, and not like diagonally, so further up. Now, of course, we could turn the whole character like that, but then obviously it's not going to work because it's not grounded anymore. So what we need is to twist this shape. In the past, we would have been able to use the distort tool, or maybe just select the head and the upper body and maybe just turn that around a bit. But instead of doing all that, now what we can do, let me just lock these other layers, make sure I don't select those. So now what we can do is to select the puppet warp feature. So I'm going to select that, the puppet warp, and then what we are going to do is to click on the shape. Now, in the properties panel, there is an option which I can turn on for now, just so you can see what happens, that the puppet warp feature actually creates a mesh. And this mesh is going to be used to turn and warp the details of our vector object. And this is a quite complex vector artwork. You can see we have shading on it. There's quite a lot of elements on it. And I prefer to turn off the mesh while I'm working with it because it's not necessary to see it. And also good to know that under the view menu, you have the hide show edges option, which I like to turn off as well whenever I work with complex details, because again, I don't need to see those outlines whenever I do this. So I use the hide edges option, and I also take off the mesh. So then if I now click on details, let's say I have already one point here on the foot. I'm going to add another one on this foot. And if I click just one here on the neck, I can already show you that I can change her posture as quickly as that. So it's almost like a little animation. Let me just zoom out a bit so you can see it better. So it's actually already working. And if I take her all the way here, see how she actually already, I don't know if it's a she or a he, but let's just say it's a girl. I think it's a girl. She has long hair. So if I take her all the way back, she actually already looks up a bit. And if I want, all I need to do is to use the circle instead of the center point, use the circle to start rotating that point there. So once I moved her back, I can just click and drag, and immediately we have the pose we need. How amazing is that? I can't tell you how excited I am about this, because it would have saved so much time in the past whenever I worked on complex characters and details. Sometimes you might have an object drawn in Illustrator that you love, but when the client sees it, they just want to tweak it slightly and they don't realize how long it takes to make those amends. But if I show you this, so that's what I did. If I show you how it was before and after, it seems like such a simple task, but believe me, without the puppet warp, it would have taken so much longer. And the cool thing, the best thing about the puppet warp is that it's still available to make amends to. So if I select the character, I can just show you that once I select the puppet warp, the points are still there, all right? So if I need to further tweak this, make her maybe closer to the ground like that, I can still do that. Or I can even add additional points. If I need to make her the arrow longer, I can click a point on that and I can stretch that out like so. Or I can make it closer, but maybe just stretch it out a little bit, and so on and so forth. So there's so much things we can do. We can also drag her body slightly a little bit around. But let me just go back to that simple setup that we had there. And let's try to play around with the raccoon, the little friend here on the right. I just love this one as well. So what I did, I made sure that the raccoon has the tail in the background. So it's set up in a way that it's grouped, but most importantly, the tail is behind the body and the head. Sorry. So if I select it and I use the puppet warp, then I prefer to put points on the foot, so it keeps it grounded. Whatever the character is, it keeps it grounded. If I put another one on the neck like before, I can start already make the raccoon dancing, which is fun. I just can't have enough of this. But yeah, so let's just keep the raccoon in place. And I'm going to put another pin here on the tail and another pin on the top of the tail. So now if I start dragging that, you can see how amazing that is. Again, almost like an animation, really. So we can move the tail around, and don't forget, we can also click on the corners, and then we can rotate these details as well. So if I want, I can also select the head, and I can make the raccoon look up as well, although it starts to look a little bit strange. So if you feel that you get too distorted, just make sure you move the points around. So what essentially I did here is to move the tail around, but let's just move the tail a little bit further down. So now it's a little bit too much overlap on the tail. Now, one thing that you can notice is that once we have the head and the tail joined together, they actually start moving together. Because there's like an overlap within the actual character, they are going to stick together, because now I move them and overlap them on top of each other. So although it's an amazing feature, you have to think about how you want to use it. So I recommend maybe sometimes having the tail and the body, or the actual raccoon's character, on two separate groups independent from each other, and then you can use two separate puppet warps for them. And that way you won't get this issue with the overlap. Okay, but essentially what we created here is that now both characters are looking up to the sky wherever the girl is pointing at. So I can see some comments saying that this is amazing and you guys love it. I agree, this is really cool, and I can't get enough of this. So if you haven't tried it yet, make sure you do so, because this is really something amazing. All right, so let me move on, and I'm just going to switch on to InDesign now, just to show you something in there. Now, InDesign is not the sexiest application to present, and I didn't really have time to properly create examples, but I chose to create examples that are really simple and easy to understand. Imagine this is a layout, and there's a beautiful magazine spread that we can see here. And I'm going to show you one of the features that came out with the CC 2018 release, and that is the new feature for objects to set their size and position based on another object. So there's a tool which you probably know of, the eyedropper tool, with which you can pick colors and additional features. So for example, if I have this shape here on the right, the blue rounded rectangle, and I want the one on the left to be looking exactly the same way, I can select that shape on the top left. And from the toolbar, if I double click on the eyedropper tool, notice that we have a couple of different categories here, out of which the new one is the transform options. This hasn't been here before. This is a new thing. I take it off just so you can see what happens. If I have the magenta rectangle selected and I click on the blue rectangle on the bottom right, we'll see that whatever is available is the color and the properties like the corner radius, but the position and the size of the rectangle won't change. So let me go back one step, and now if I double click on the eyedropper, I turn on transform options, so that includes the object size and position as well. Now if I click on the other little blue rectangle on the right, everything will be matched. So position, size, color, and additional attributes. So it picks up everything and it replicates it. Now let's see this in another example. If I go in here and we have a image on the top, it's like a header. Let's say this is again a format that we need to use in a document, that we have an image on the top and it's set to that size. Now if I create an empty frame, F is the shortcut for creating frames in InDesign, and I just use the W key to switch to the normal view so we can see the frame itself. So when you have an empty frame, you have a cross on it in InDesign. That's like a typical wireframing metaphor for empty elements, or like a grid that is prepared, a wireframe. So we have that ready, and I'm going to use bridge to select an image. Maybe let's just select this image, and by dragging this, let's just use our Illustrator little characters. They are so cute. Let's just use them here. So if I drag and drop them in, by the way, I'm using Command Tab or Alt Tab on PC to switch or swap between the applications. When you see these icons showing up, that's how I do it. I hold down the Command key and then keep pressing Tab to switch, or just select what I need and click on it. So once I picked my image and dragged and dropped it into this empty frame, now if I select that empty frame, it's not empty anymore, the frame with the girl and the raccoon, now using the eyedropper tool, I can click on the image on the top left, and voila, it's updating it. The only thing that didn't work out in this case, because it's a vector object, is the actual size. But let me just fix that, and I'm going to try it again. So let's just try it with an empty frame. Use the eyedropper, click on that one on the left, and it's still not doing it correctly, which is weird. I think it's because we are already using, yes, I set up a style as well here. Probably that was the problem. I tested this out, but because it's such a new feature, I still don't actually make it work perfectly all the time. Let me try this again. So if I have another frame maybe here, and we place an image inside it, maybe that one, all right, and I'm going to create another frame up here, and I'm going to place maybe the same image inside there. Now using the eyedropper tool, clicking on there, it updates it, but for some reason it does the same mistake, and that is really weird, because let me just see the eyedropper. It's probably picking up something else that I'm not aware of at the moment. But let me show you how this actually can work with images. The fact about this feature is that you can save it as an object style. Save it into an object style. So if I create a frame, again, an empty frame, and I click on this style, because I saved it, it works fine on that. I'm sorry for the demonstration not working in this live demo. There's always something that goes wrong, but this actually works. So you could see that from that frame, it actually aligns to the top edge and even the size to what we need, because that object style in InDesign is using, so if I go into that, is using the new feature that we have here, the size and position options. So here we can set up that it records the height and width and adjust the position as well, and you can refine how it works. By default, this option, by the way, is set to none, and you can decide which option you want to use. But because I already saved that, and it's saved based on this image here, we will be able to see how it works. Let me just fill this other image in, maybe with another detail, probably with this image with the door. And I'm just going to fill it in so we can see a bit more of it, and drag it down, something like that. All right, so if it's saved as an object style, that means if I update one of these objects, which works with that object style. You can't actually see the object styles panel in the window because of my webcam, but I moved it up here so you can see it. So there's the header image object style that I'm using on this image. But if I click on that, it keeps updating it back to the way it was saved. So the position is recorded and the size of that frame. But if I want to update it, and then if I want to have a little bit more space on the header image, I can right click on this and redefine my style based on these changes, which in turn will not only update that, but also updates all the other objects in the document. And you can see how it updated on the right side. So if I select that and I drag that even further down, if I right click and choose redefine style, it's going to update, but it's going to also update if I move this down. So not only the size, but also the position can be updated. So if I redefine it, there you go, it will follow. And you might not realize how interesting or how important this is. It is almost like a master page behavior. So if any one of you worked in InDesign before, you probably work with master pages, and they do something very similar. So you can position an object somewhere on the master page and it will be replicated throughout the whole document. But if that object needs to keep changing, then a master page element doesn't really make sense, because only you want to make sure that the position and the size is in the same place, but the content itself is different. So now this new feature actually gives the best workflow for that. So instead of relying on a master page for constantly alternating or changing content, you can use this feature because it will still be able to keep it connected, the size and position of your elements. So if only that is important, then that's the solution. Sorry if it was a little bit complicated, my example, but hopefully it made sense. I hope you guys liked it. But let me go back to Photoshop, because there's a lot of you guys who probably prefer to see something more amazing and less boring. Hopefully InDesign is not boring. It's a very important tool. If I'm just wondering, you can let me know in the comments which one is your strongest tool out of the three: Photoshop, Illustrator, or InDesign. Which one you are most confident in? And you can tell me also which one you are least confident in. If you guys haven't tried or learned InDesign already, if you want to do graphic design, you have to learn it. It's just something that you must. And believe me, once you learn InDesign, it actually will help you tremendously. It's just such an amazing tool. So yeah, I can see some answers are coming in already, that Photoshop is the strongest. I asked this before in another stream when we talked about the right tool to work with, and believe me, all three are just as important. Of course, depending on the work. If you are a retoucher, then probably Photoshop is enough and you don't need InDesign. But for graphic design, it's equally important to learn all three of them. Now let me move on to another cool feature, and it's called variable fonts. Now this is against one of those features that Adobe actually presented quite well, but I can't stress enough how useful this is and how useful this will be once there will be more variable fonts available. Currently there's not many of them, but it's still an amazing thing to play around with. So here I have a composition. First of all, let's just fix the composition before we move on to the variable font. And I wanted to show you another feature that was improved in the current version, CC 2018. So I don't know about you, but I feel like we need a little bit more space on the right. So if I want to use this text here where it is, it feels a little bit like it's too close to the right edge. It's a little bit out of balance. So we need a little bit more space there. So all I'm going to do is to use the crop tool. So we are back in Photoshop again. Using the crop tool, I'm going to extend the space a bit more. And generally, as a guideline, it's good to set the important details to the thirds of your image. And that is something we can see when we use the crop tool. It shows our thirds within the image. And you see, if I have the girl, her head, in one of the third lines, and then in the other third line we have the text starts here, then the two focus points are in the best position. That's why I felt like I needed a bit of more space on the right of the canvas. So using the crop tool, you not only can crop, but you can also extend the canvas. That has been available in older versions as well. That's nothing new there. Now I press enter, so we accept the transformation or the canvas increase. And then I am going to select my background layer and go up to the edit menu. And there's also a feature which has been around since CS5. It's called Content Aware Scale. Now selecting that, what we can do, actually CS4 it was introduced, I think. Selecting that, there will be something amazing happening. When I start increasing or decreasing the width of this image, it automatically recognizes the person in the image and it will never distort her at all. So just to show you this with the normal free transform, if I use that, that's what happens. She's going to get really thin or she will put a little bit weight on. So that's not really ideal when you are doing transformations. That's something that, as I said, has been available for quite a while, but since CC 2018, the recognition system, I mean the algorithm that's used here, got so much smarter that it does such an amazing job now. Anything to do with content aware in Photoshop, the fill, the scale, the healing, got so much smarter thanks to a feature called Adobe Sensei. Now, this is artificial intelligence. It's something like Stranger Things. It's really amazing. It's something we don't really know how it works, but it just works. It's machine learning and deep learning. If you heard these keywords before, Adobe is now using the system to understand what is shown on the image. So instead of us adding keywords, for example, in Lightroom, Lightroom will be able to recognize what is on the image to an amazing closeness. So it is really mind-blowing. If you search for within your catalog, in the Lightroom catalog, if you search for something, it will find it for you, even if it's just a small detail. So I'm going to put my text slightly to the right. Actually, I'm going to select that detail as well there. So because of this Adobe Sensei artificial intelligence, this content aware feel and scale got better, so we could do this quickly. But one other thing I wanted to do also is to just make it a little bit more visible, the text. And this is just generally a good idea to do whenever you create banners, for example, for a website, or like a main image for a website, that if you use image and text on top of it, legibility is very important. So when you look at this, it's all right because the text doesn't have much detail behind it. But if we want to keep our text white, then we probably need to darken the image a bit. And instead of just simply darkening it, I'm going to use adjustments for it. So we could go into the adjustments and select an adjustment layer, for example. But it's interesting to know that if you turn this layer into a smart object, so I go up here and choose from the layer menu, smart objects, convert to smart object, then I can now actually use the image options, so image adjustments levels, and this is going to be added as a smart filter. Now, not many people know this, but this actually is also a non-destructive method of adding adjustments. So you can see it here in the layers panel. I can turn this adjustment off and turn it back on, and you can see it's completely non-destructive, so we can make changes on the fly. So it's similar to using adjustment layers, but instead of packing them up, you keep them all attached to the layer itself. This is something that has been also around since the last update, CC 2017, but I thought it's worth mentioning. But let's move on, because this is still not how I imagined it to look. So we can add also another adjustments, maybe just the general exposure we can add on it, or maybe levels would be better if I go to, sorry, not levels, curves. If I use that, we can just generally darken a little bit the background, like so. And to be honest, we could have been just using the levels to do the same thing, something like that. Okay, I think that looks quite good. So if I turn it off, the adjustments, that's how it was, and this is how it's after. So obviously the corners got a little bit too dark, but let's not worry about them. By the way, if I wanted to reduce the effect there, I could just use the Smart Filter mask. Using a big soft brush, I can just draw over the corners. And notice, by the way, when I'm using the brush, there's a little magenta or pink line is moving around on the screen. Just to show you again, can you see that line moving around? Now that is because of a preference. It's a new preference under cursors. It's called Show Brush Leash While Smoothing. And that's something I explained in a lot of detail in the previous stream when I talked about illustration and the new brush system in Photoshop. And I forgot to mention that you can turn that off here. So if it bugs you as a designer, you might not draw and you might not need to see that, or even if you are a digital artist, you might not want to see that leash moving around, so you can always turn that off. Or by the way, you can also turn off smoothing up here and then it will disappear. But yeah, by drawing over the corners, we can lighten them up a bit, meaning that we are not using as much of these effects that we applied. So just to show you without the mask, and with the mask, now it looks a little bit better. Now, of course, we could refine this further, but the main reason why I wanted to create this composition is to show you how the variable font works. So if I select the Your Journey, let's just say, notice that here we have the Properties panel, and the Properties panel has been around in Photoshop for a while, but now they introduced a couple of additional features we can access from here, including font settings like size, the font itself, kerning and tracking, and most importantly, if you are working with a variable font, you will have these three options here, or two, depending on the amount of variations on the font. But we have for this one, which is called Acumen Variable Concept, that's the font's name, and it has weight, width, and slant options. So if I start changing these, look what happens. When I start increasing the weight, my selected font or text can increase in size or decrease in size. This is the thickness of the font. So let me zoom a little bit closer. So if I just click in there and use shift up and down arrow, actually, let me just click and drag it. It's probably updates. So because I'm streaming, it's not as fast as normally, but it still shows quite well what is going on. But not only the weight of the font can be changed, but also the width. And width is something that we call condensed when the width is reduced. This is something we would call condensed font, and we would call this wide font, probably. I don't really know what's not condensed, what's the term for it. Probably black, I would call it. Not black the color, but black as like being wide and thick font. And not only this, but we also have slant, which is like adding angles like an italic font. And all this can be controlled with just 3 values instead of looking through all the different variations. Because for this to work, notice how many different variations this font needs to have. So this we would normally call a font family, and the styling of the font. And it's just an incredible amount of variation we have here. And instead of browsing through this and trying to find the right one for us, we could just easily tweak things around like that, dragging these 3 values. And currently, I just wanted to show you, for those who are interested to try this out, the fonts that are available are the ones that I have here. Wherever you see the little VAR, so variable font, these are the ones that automatically you will find them in Photoshop CC 2018, and they promise to release more of these. Most likely they will come through Typekit, by the way, but we'll see. They haven't updated Typekit yet for this font format, but we can already see Minion is here, Acumen is here, Myriad, there's 3 different source fonts, and we have this one called Skia or Skya. And by the way, at this point, I want to also mention that there was an improvement of another type of font, SVG fonts. These are fonts where you have not only one color, but you can have multiple colors and even gradients on your fonts, because each of the glyphs here can be a full vector graphic, including color and detail. So this one, for example, if you want to test it out, that triangle color is going to already look like a nice beveled 3D text automatically. That's how it types. So that's just really cool, I think. And there's also like emoji fonts now with colors in them. So it's worth experimenting with both the SVG fonts and the variable fonts. But just to come back to the detail that we had here, I'm just going to go back to the way it was set up originally, because there's one other thing I wanted to mention, and that is that another amazing thing that they introduced in Photoshop CC 2018 is that now we can select two or more, basically multiple text layers can be selected together, and you can change their size, font, and color. But not only that, if they are both variable fonts, you can also keep changing their values, these three values that we had here before, and I can create add more slant on them. Maybe we can reduce the width a bit more, and we can increase the weight a little bit more. Maybe less weight is better. All right, and if you feel like we need to make your journey a bit more bulky because it's smaller, we can just do that, and it looks already much better. And now maybe I can just move this path a little bit also on an angle, something like that. I'm just using the direct selection tool, and then we can move this in place just to mirror that angle that we created. And then by selecting all of them, we can make them with the free transform tool slightly bigger, and then we have a cool banner there thanks to the variable fonts. Now, another amazing thing which I love is that you can now copy paste layers from one document into another document, or even within the document itself you can do that. Before you had to like duplicate and then drag and drop, and it just takes so long. Now all I need to do is to press Command C or Control C, switch to another document. Let's go back to the one with the door. I'm going to turn off my masks, and Command V or Control V. There you go. We have our amazing layers that we created in the other document. And probably here we can just put it somewhere here on the left side. Now, the other thing I wanted to show you is that in Photoshop, they also improved another very important thing, and that is for increasing or upscaling images. So let me show you this first with this image here. I'm just going to remove the mask, delete the vector mask, and this is the current size of this document. You can't actually see it. I'm just going to turn off my camera for a second, but now you will see it at the bottom left corner that it says 100%. So there at the bottom it says 100%. That's the actual size. If I zoom any closer than this, so I'm just going to zoom closer now, let me just zoom here, you will see it gets pixelated. And after a while, we will actually see these pixels because it's not a high resolution image enough to see that much detail. So if I zoom back to the 100% or the actual pixel size we call it, now I can use the shortcut Command-Alt-I, which is going to give us the image size dialog box. By the way, it's from image size. That's how you can find it. This now in CC 2018 has a new feature called Preserve Details 2.0. Right? That's the new option. Before Creative Cloud, we only had the bicubic smoother algorithm, which was intentionally created for enlarging or upscaling images. Then in CC, I think 2014, we got the Preserve Details algorithm, which was better. But now we have 2.0, which is even better and smarter. And just to demonstrate this to you, I actually prepared 3 versions of this image, upscaled versions of them. So let me go, and I'm just going to close these, and I'll just save this one. It's so nice, I can't just close it. going to save it. Yeah, actually it was already saved, that's fine. So what I'm going to do is I will open up these 3 images and we'll be able to have a closer look at them in Photoshop. So if I now zoom closer, I will go on this one. I enlarge it and enlarged the original image 3 times. So it's a 3 times larger version or upscaled version compared to the original. And I'm just going to zoom really close just so you can really see the difference. Now you can tell already that it was a very low resolution image to begin with because we have a lot of noise on the edges. This is the bicubic upscaling, which used to be in CS6 and the previous versions. And to make sure that we see exactly the same point in the other 2 versions, I'm going to go to Window, Arrange, and Match All, which will match the position and the zoom as well in the other 2 documents, because they are the same size, it will work. So now if I switch to the next one, this is the preserve detail feature or algorithm that was introduced in CC 2014, and this is the new one, Preserve Detail 2.0. Now let me toggle through these and let you have a closer look at them again. So this is the original bicubic, then the better Preserve Detail 1, and then Preserve Detail 2. Now I'm just going to switch between the 2 different versions of Preserve Details. So if I switch to the new one, that's how it looks. If I go back to the previous one, that's how it looks. So you can tell that the original Preserve Detail had a very strong contrast on the edge, and it almost created like a halo. This is like, we could almost feel like it's a chromatic aberration, which is something that we get with photographs in general, but it's something that the new Preserve Details filters out beautifully. So once again, bicubic, Preserve Detail 1, Preserve Detail 2, and I'm just going to switch between the 2 versions of Preserve Detail, and I'm going to zoom out, and even from a distance you will see the difference. So if I switch, by the way, I'm using Control Tab to switch between these versions, and I'm going to use again the Arrange, Match All. So if I toggle through, that's bicubic, that's Preserve Detail 1 and Preserve Detail 2. Maybe I zoom a little bit closer here in the center just so we can see all these lines. What you see is that we have no noise in the image, but still we have very sharp, crisp edges and just really good details, considering that this is a 3 times upscale. So the original image was around 500 pixels wide, and this is 1500 pixels wide, so 3 times as big as the original one. Let's again Window, Arrange, Match All, and then we can see it 1, 2, 3. So 1 is worst, 2nd is better, and 3rd even better. You can see from a distance the original or previous Preserve Details had a little bit less sharpness on the edges, where the new one has just the right amount. Once again, thanks to Adobe Sensei. It actually, Photoshop understands what's on the image and where to amend certain things and how to apply it. So it's a much smarter way of using upscaling. There's a question coming from Razwan. I'm not sure if I pronounce your name correctly. Yes, you can rewatch there's a recording of the whole session. So if you missed any part of it, you will be able to watch it again. It will be available on my YouTube channel soon after I finish it. So it takes some time for rendering. A couple of hours later, latest tomorrow, you will be able to watch it again, the whole thing. So cool. Okay, so what I would like to move on now, so that is the new Preserve Details, we covered that. What I would like to show you, let me just see what else we have here. By the way, the variable fonts are also available in Illustrator, so that's just good to know that you can find them there. And yes, in Illustrator, there's another thing that has been improved. In general, that when you work in Illustrator, you have now a new workspace called Essentials and Essentials Classic. Now, the Essential Classic would have the panels and things the way you normally set them up. But the Essentials, the new one, has only the Properties panel here on the right, and it even removed the control bar from the top, because now they have all of those options available here on the right side. Some things might be still missing, but it's a very convenient, centralized panel which has a lot of useful things in it. So let me just remove my logo for a bit, because you can see then the name as well. So the Properties panel is brand new. It's a new thing that they introduced in Illustrator CC 2018. And there's a lot of things here, but most importantly, it will always adapt to the context. So whatever you select or whichever tool you use, you will see the necessary features there on the right side. So you have most of the things you would normally get in the control bar, which used to be on the top. But if you still want to have the control bar available when you work in the Essentials workspace, just go up to the window menu and then choose Control. So then you will get the control bar there on the top as well. So it's worth having it there if you want to have both, but it's also worth exploring what the new Properties panel can do. Another cool thing that we have in Illustrator as a new feature is that now we can have multiple, more artboards. So it used to be restricted to 99 artboards. It's like pages in InDesign. In Illustrator, we could only create 99. Now they increase the amount up to 1,000. But more importantly, you can actually select multiple artboards at the same time. So if I, for example, want to have a different version, or maybe 3 different versions of this same design, I can use the artboard tool, which is Shift-O, the shortcut, or there's the artboard tool in the toolbar. And with that Alt click and drag, I can create a couple of versions of this logo. All right, so we can create a couple of versions. Now, if I move them and align them to each other, notice how the Smart Guide helps me to do that. Now I can select them and I can change their color. So maybe if that's something the client wanted to test out, we can do that, but we can also use maybe styles. So I'm just going to select a different style for that and another style for this. These are graphic styles, by the way, that I'm using. These have been available in previous versions as well. Just a quick example why you would have multiple artboards, and it can have completely different designs on it as well, of course. But now that we have in CC 2018 the option to select multiple artboards, and it keeps reminding me that, it's really coming up this pop-up and telling me that I can do that. I will do that by shift clicking. I can select multiple artboards and I can move them together. So if I wanted to, I can also do the same thing by holding down the shift key and just making a marquee selection. That's also a fast way to select multiple artboards and move them around. But not only that, if I wanted to, I can use also this feature called rearrange. Up here in the control bar, we have rearrange all. And with that, I can actually set them up into maybe one row or one column. So if I set this to one column and I want them to go down, maybe like that, I can even set the spacing between them. And if I click OK, it just quickly does that. But once again, arrange into a row and then maybe have a bit more space between them. There you go, quickly and easily done. If I have them, let me just move them apart a little bit. So if I have them independently, something a little bit more messy. All right, let's just have it like that. Command Alt or Control Alt 0 is the way you can quickly zoom out and show all your artboards, by the way. But now if I select all of my artboards, by the way, if I want to get rid of the pop-ups, because it keeps coming up, this is something that most likely we can turn off in the preferences. Let me just find it, show tooltips, that's the one. So under preferences, turn off show tooltips if you don't want to see them. And if I select all of my artboards, so shift click and drag, select all of them, select that bottom as well. Let me just try again. So just going to shift click, select all of them. The good thing that you can also use distribute and align options. So if I want to align them maybe to the left edge or right edge or center, these are all options as well here in the control bar or from the properties panel that we can also use. So that's also another neat new feature, working with multiple artboards at the same time. Okay, let me just quickly look at my comments. So there was a question: how can I edit image in Adobe Illustrator? Is there any method to edit background in Illustrator? You can change the background, but only by adding in detail. So you can't change the color of your artboard, but you can create, for example, if I create a rectangle like so, and I change the color of it, or maybe just change the style of it like that, I just have to make sure it goes all the way in the back. So choose arrange, send to back, and that way we have a different background, and we can just press Command or Control 2 to lock it, to make sure that we don't accidentally select it. So that's the way you change the background. And of course you could place an image as well in the background if you wanted to. You can't really edit images in Illustrator. You can vectorize them by using image trace, or you can just do very simple things like cropping. You can do, since a recent update also in Illustrator, you can do that directly here. But generally editing the photographs or images, you would need to use Photoshop, even when you combine it together in Illustrator. Okay, so we are getting close to the end. There's something in InDesign also I wanted to show you. So let me move on to this page here. There is a feature that some of you might be familiar with, which is called footnote, and that has been available in InDesign before, but now they added another similar feature called endnote. So whenever a long document has a lot of copy, and the copy needs sometimes explanation, or there's some references to certain things, then it often happens that there would be an endnote for the end of the chapter, or even at the very end of the book, and then all those references you can find within the endnote. Now, if we imagine that this text here needs an endnote, we can just click somewhere within the text, then right click, and then if that's part of the text needs the endnote, all I have to do is to just choose Insert Endnote. And once I do that, it also automatically adds a new page in the document and creates a new text frame, which is called endnotes, and I can start typing. This is the first entry. Okay, that could be the explanation. Now if I go up and add another one, maybe here, right click, insert endnote. Once again, we have an additional endnote, and we can say another one. And that's it. So that's how simple it is. And one thing that is worth mentioning is that when you have an end note, let's say, you can right click and choose go to endnote reference. So it can take you back and show you where it is in the document. And if it's an interactive PDF you are creating, you can also link these things so people will be able to click on it and it will take them, or it can be also a bookmark so people will find it. Another really cool feature that they introduced is now that you can have borders around your paragraphs. So borders is something we could create only around the whole text frame, but now even individual paragraphs can have their borders. And it's joined together with the shading feature, which was also a recent addition in InDesign for formatting paragraphs. So what I'm going to do is to just click within this paragraph here, and notice I have already space before and after I did. That's just simply using the space before option here. But here in the options bar, we have this new feature called border. So there's the shading and there's border. If I click on border, notice what happened is that it created a border around my paragraph. Now we can change the color of this quite quickly and easily. Maybe I can set it to red like that. But if I alt click, and let me zoom closer so you can see what I'm clicking on. If I alt click on this icon here, that's what opens up the additional settings for the border feature. And it has quite a lot of settings here, but most importantly, it has offsets. So I can increase that value, and notice how it increases the space around the paragraph, so we have a bit more space. And then we can of course also increase the size of the stroke if we want. If we want, we can even have different size for each of the edges of this border, and then we can also change the tint. Maybe we would just want a bit more faded version of this color. We can have a different type, maybe Japanese dot, and so on and so forth. So you can see that this can be a very useful feature. And there is a cool and useful option here: display border if paragraphs split across frames and columns. Now that's something that you might not want to use. That's why there is an option, so you can disable it or enable it only if you want to. Otherwise, it won't split it between frames and columns. All right. So I accidentally just pressed escape, so I forgot what I just set up here. I'm just going to quickly set it back just so we can see it better. All right. So that is another option that we have as a new feature in InDesign. And there's also another really important feature which I would like to mention. This works in InDesign and Illustrator at the moment. Just want to check how many of you guys actually used Creative Cloud libraries. Of course, if you are not on Creative Cloud version, then you probably haven't used it already. But Creative Cloud libraries is something that I think is very, very important. So if you haven't started using it already, it's a feature with which you are really missing out. Creative Cloud libraries, you will find that you can save graphics, styles, and reuse them in projects, even not just in the same application, but throughout the Creative Cloud applications. So let me just move back to my screen. And what I wanted to show you here is, for example, if this text, I just select, highlight, and I want to reuse this in another document, now I can add this into a library. So there's the CC libraries panel in InDesign, and I'm just going to switch to one that I call test. And within this, if I click on the plus sign here at the bottom, notice that instead of saving this as a graphic or as styles, I can just select the text option, which is the new feature in CC 2018. And if I say add, this text is actually now added in here in this library, which is great because now if I want to use this in another document, so let me just create another document, I can use the type tool and then go to the CC library and click on that text and drag and drop it in here. Double click or drag and drop, whichever you prefer, and you can see it not only records or brings in the text, but it also uses the same formatting. So it has multiple uses, and the best thing about this is that we can actually edit the original text as well. So just to show you once again, if I drag and drop this, it comes in as a new text frame. All right, that's drag and dropping. But if I go and want to edit the source of that text, the copy itself, all I have to do is to either right click and choose edit, or double click on this element or asset, we call them, whatever is in the Creative Cloud library. And then, for example, if I want to change the text here on the top and just call it InDesign InDesign CC 2018 features, maybe. All right. Although they are not, but let's say that we wanted to do that, then I can go to File, Save, and once I save it, see, it will update in this document and in every other document where it was used as a Creative Cloud asset. So when I come back to the original, the source where the original file or text frame was, there it won't update because that was only used as the prototype. So that was the one that I used to define this. To make sure that this is also going to update, I have to replace that text frame with this new one. So I can just drag that new one in, click and place, or click and drag, and now anything I'm going to do to the source will update in all of these documents, even if they are not open. So the good thing is that this copy is now connected to the cloud, the Creative Cloud. So you can see the little cloud icon there. It's not a simple link, it's linked to the Creative Cloud account that I'm using. And Best thing is that you can even use the same text in Illustrator. So if we come back here, maybe into this document, I can use again that panel. So going to the window menu, we will find the panel in here. For some reason here in Illustrator is just called libraries, although this is supposed to be the CC libraries. But there we can find the same library called test. And if I just drag and drop that text in here and click and drag, there's our exactly the same text. And once again, if we were to make any changes, it will update here and in all the other either InDesign or Illustrator documents wherever we use this asset. So that's a huge time saver. Again, not a really sexy and fancy feature, but I wanted to show you because I already started using this and it saves so much time. So it's again helps to be more efficient and just work more professionally. Less time wasted on updating and amending all the different versions of the same thing. Okay, so let me just double check that I showed you everything. There's a few other things in each application that they improved and tweaked, but I think these were the most important ones. Maybe just one last thing in Photoshop I wanted to show you, and that is if you already started using, oh actually there's one last one which is probably going to be again an amazing one. So 2 more I'm showing you. We will be done in 10 minutes. I will give you a little bit of time at the end for questions if you have any, but here's a very quick one. If you're working with Creative Cloud stock files or stock images or stock illustrations, it's called Adobe stock, then having these previews downloaded now will let you find the asset easily by having a layer selected that is an Adobe stock image or illustration. You will be able to see in the properties panel what is the actual name of that file. You can click on this link here and go and see it on the website, or you can directly license it if you need to buy it, and that way the watermark will go away. Or you can also click on the find similar option, which is the reason I'm showing you this, because that will open up a browser and it will automatically look for similar images. Once again, this is Adobe Sensei recognizing the image and not just relying on keywords, but actually looking at the image. And just so you can see, Adobe is not joking around when it says doing stock like no one else can do. If you look at their filter options here on the left side, there's some crazy things here like depth of field, analyzing images based on the depth of field in photographs, or based on their colors, how vivid or less vivid the colors are, whether there's people in the image or not, and so on and so forth. There's loads of filtering options, and these are all things that, once again, that deep learning or machine learning improved for Adobe stock. Okay, so that's just a little bit about the stock. And by the way, in Bridge as well, now that we are talking about stock, if you are a photographer or a designer and you want to sell your work on Adobe stock, you can use Bridge to quickly upload your work and sell them on the Adobe stock. By using from Bridge the Publish panel, you will find Adobe stock contributor. And the cool thing is that you could even select multiple images and just choose that. And then all you have to do is to set it up. And then you will be able to immediately publish from within Bridge into Adobe stock. Okay, so let me move on to our last example. And I'll just open up the image and let's see if you guys can find out what we are going to use this for. Just guess, what is this image for? What feature I'm going to show you which improved again in CC 2018. It's a feature we need to do a lot in Photoshop, and it has to do about selections. I'll just wait a little bit if anyone is still there to give us the answer for that. I'm just going to quickly have a look. It's supposed to be still some people on Facebook and also on Twitter, so it seems like it's cool. It seems like everyone is all the platforms are being in use, not just YouTube. But yeah, so the question is what feature we are going to do here. Hair selection, that's the one. Cool. So yes, hair selection is something that we have to do very often. And the reason I'm showing this, because it didn't change a lot, but it just got much more streamlined. And again, the algorithm itself improved. And I can see that, I mean, it's faster and also more accurate. So we have a very strong color here in the background, which affects the hair. So all that thin blonde hair, it looks more like that color in the background, the wall color. And to separate it is not easy. So what we are going to do is to simply go to select and mask. From the select menu, I am going to use select and mask. So once I select that, I am going to see exactly what happens. So it goes into this completely separate workspace. Again, it's not completely new, but they just improved it in the most recent version. That's why I'm showing it to you. But what you need to use here are these simple tools on the top left, starting with the first one, which is the quick selection tool. That's W. And then you will be using the refine edge brush tool R, with which you can refine the selection. So W and R are two useful shortcuts to remember. You can use the Control Alt click and drag left and right to quickly increase your brush size. So that's Control Alt both for Mac and PC. And then all you have to do is to click and start painting over the image to select the details you need. So whatever starts to come up as highlighted detail, that means now we have those details in our selection. So let's just include the hair and the dress like so. Then there's a little bit more details here at the bottom. There's a chair as well, some more details there. And then let's not forget about the glasses, like that, and then the hair. And we are pretty good to go now. If I press Y, with Y we can see a different look on the image. So instead of the onion skin, this is called on layers. So you can switch between these two by using O and Y, these two shortcuts. So when you want to make sure that you don't miss any details, it's worth quickly just clicking or pressing Y, and then you can switch back to O. Or you can also change your transparency up here. So you can see the original details, or you can increase the transparency value to see exactly your selection. Of course, there's also different views, which at this point would worth already choosing, like on black, the shortcut is A, or on white, T, and black and white, which is the mask view, is K. So A, T, K. A is black, T is white, K is the mask itself. And in the mask view, I can see already that we have a few things missed. So I'm just going to quickly select those as well, make sure that they are included. Now I will switch back to maybe white background, and then pressing R on the keyboard, we will switch to the other tool, the refine tool. And then I'm going to just paint over the edges, and it will bring out all the necessary details on our soft selection. So let's see that on the black. I just undo and do this again just so you can see what happens. So you can see how nicely it brings out all the edges, the soft edge details that we were missing. And I don't think we need it here on the left side, but we can use it just a little bit more on there as well. So overall, it's a quite good and quick way of making selections, but of course there's plenty of ways of improving selections. I already showed in previous streams. I just wanted to show you that this is how they improved the way you work in the select and mask feature in Photoshop, and this is the result of the new algorithm. So it's worth turning on the high quality preview option as well, just so you can see exactly what you're doing. And then, of course, when you output this, just don't forget to set it as a mask, not as a selection. So you want to save it as a mask and click OK. And there you go. That's our end result. And if I want to see the mask, I can Alt click on the mask icon to see exactly how it's created or what it's created. As I said, this can be improved because there are some highlights that are see-through, which we could fix. But overall, these are the most important features that were released in CC 2018. So we went through quite a lot. We looked at Photoshop, Illustrator, InDesign, And of course, this is not all the new features, but these I found the most useful and most crucial to get started with them as soon as possible, to be able to make use of all these features released in CC 2018. So let me have a look at quickly the chat and see if there's any questions. So guys, feel free to ask questions on YouTube, Facebook, or Twitter, wherever you are. We have a few more minutes left before I finish, just to make sure that we covered everything that you wanted to know. I will try to do another stream next week. It might not be on Sunday though. It most likely will be either on Friday or Saturday, but most likely Friday. So it's going to change slightly the schedule for next week, but and also the topic, I'm not 100% sure yet, but yes, we will be doing it most likely on Friday, but I will schedule it on Facebook and YouTube as well, so you should be able to see once I do that. All right, so are there any questions before we finish? I can see on YouTube a question. Can you tell about the blend tools in CC 2018? There's actually no blend tool, blend tool. There is the mixer brush that you can use for blending, if that's what you mean, or the smudge tool. But these are things I showed in the previous live stream. So when you do painting, for example, and do the blending, you can use these tools. So it's the mixer brush or the smudge tool, and they can be used for blending. I can see someone's asking to stream in 180p, so in full HD. I will probably do that. The reason I reduced the stream quality is to make sure it was going to work for Twitter and Facebook. But I'm going to try it out next time to do it in full HD and see, hopefully it's going to work in that level or in that quality as well. Okay, let's see if there's any other questions. Let me see in Facebook if there's any more questions coming in there. Okay. I think that's all the questions that we had. So if you want to get in touch with us, you can do that on YouTube, use the comments, and also you can find us on yesimadesigner.com. And if you want to learn more about these applications, we have the masterclass courses and also the other courses recorded on our website. And I'm just going to say goodbye to you guys, but if you just one last thing, if you want to see more of these streams and if you find it useful and you want to maybe find some useful references and resources, please check out our Patreon. So with that, you can help us and just sponsor the YouTube channel and these live streams. So you can decide how much you are willing to give for our stream. So it can be even $1 a month, but believe me, every little helps. So I would really appreciate if you find these videos useful to check out our Patreon site. You have the link in the description here on YouTube and also on Facebook. You can find us on Patreon, and yeah, so check out our website, and see you guys next time on either Friday or wherever it is going to be. I'm going to schedule it. So thanks a lot for joining me, and see you guys next time. Thanks a lot for staying till the end. I hope you found this video useful. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, as I'm adding similar content regularly. If you are interested in learning more from me, you should probably check out my comprehensive training courses on my site. I have more than 200 hours of video training from beginner to expert levels, with lots of exercises, quizzes, and resources to help you develop your skills and become a professional designer. Just click on this link and create an account to start your free trial. Thanks again for joining me today, and I hope to see you in the next one.